I have known our next guest for close to quarter of a century. We were young kids when we became acquaintances and were impressionable adults when we became good friends. I had heard from all my classmates what a genius this boy was. Well, his intellectual prowess and his ability to look at any situation, problem, or task in its most abstract forms is known universally. But what I have been introduced to over the years is his golden heart. Yes, I'm talking about none other than Dr. Mausam, the founding head of Yardi School of Artificial Intelligence and a professor of computer science at the Computer Science Department at IIT Delhi. Mausam has more than 20 years research experience in artificial intelligence. He has over 100 papers to his credit, along with a book, two Best Paper Awards, one Test of Time Award. Mausam was awarded the AAAI Senior Member status in 2015 for his long term participation in AAAI and distinction in the field of artificial intelligence. He has had the privilege of being a program chair for two top tier conferences, AAAI 2021 and ICAPS 2017. He received his PhD from University of Washington in Seattle in 2007 and a BTech from IIT Delhi in 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege to welcome the genius of our times and one of my bestest friends, Dr. Mausam. Thank you, Mausam, for coming. It's an honor and a privilege to have you in the podcast Future of Education. We have known each other for many years now. I hope you have seen one of our podcasts in the past. If not, I can actually walk you through how this is structured. There are 5 parts to it. The first part being we would like to know about your experiences and your unique lenses that you have because of your professional experience or academic background and so on and so forth. Second part of the podcast is having the crystal ball in your hand and telling what the future of education hopefully is going to look like. Third part of the podcast slightly is about behavioral aspects, whatever you have experienced and what you feel is relevant in the realm of education, specifically related to children, related to education, related to parents. 1 or 2 questions for you, not many. And finally, the fourth part is it's a politically incorrect statement that we could probably solicit out of you. So you cannot answer that particular podcast or that segment by saying it depends. You have to pick a side, and then there's a surprise element to you. Okay. So as I mentioned, I have witnessed your life up and close for many years now. I think we grew up together, but I think for the audience, if we could just get a sense on how your journey has been, where all you have lived, where all you have worked, and where are you heading forward. Just a gist, nothing more.
Thanks, Tarun. It's great to be here. And I mean, if I look back, I grew up in Delhi. I grew up in Pusa campus. My mother was a scientist in agricultural statistics. So I grew up around fields. And I used to go to school at Hansraj Model School, Punjabi Bagh, which is where we met for the first time. After finishing school, I joined IIT Delhi in computer science department. I was there for 4 years. After that, I applied for PhD and I went to University of Washington in Seattle. I did my PhD in computer science there. At that time, after I was finishing, I was looking for research positions and I was lucky to actually get an offer from my own department in Seattle to become a research faculty member. So I hung around for another 6 years there.
Wow.
As a research faculty. So I was basically in Seattle for 12 years. First 6 years as a student and next 6 years as a faculty member. And then I came back to IIT Delhi. So if you look at my professional career, it's IIT Delhi, University of Washington, back to IIT Delhi. I've been here for about 10 years. I'm now a professor in computer science in IIT Delhi. I also founded the Yardi School of Artificial Intelligence at IIT Delhi. So I was the founding head. Very recently, I have passed on that baton to my successor, and I am basically focusing my time doing research.
Fantastic. I think there are quite a few similarities in our journeys. We went to HRMS Hansraj Model School together. You were in Pusa Road or Pusa campus. I was in Motinagar.
Yes.
I think we started. Both of us studied in Delhi. Of course, you went to a better school, and Then
But so did you.
yeah, well, yeah, and then
Eventually, we were both at UW, right?
At UW, University of Washington, and I think I moved back to India, and then you followed pursuit.
Yes.
So have you been always trying to follow me?
Not always. You followed me to UW, right? It's a give and take relationship. You forget.
And one more question, probably almost catching it to the third end. The fact that you have now said that you have passed on the baton of the AI school to someone else. The little bit that I knew, you had a lot of interest in teaching and some bit of interest in research. Has that changed? Have you completely become more focused on researching, or?
No, not at all. I mean, in fact, professors are a complex combination of many, many, many things. So, teaching is one aspect of us, research is another, management is another, but there's many, many things that we do. So, I still do a lot of teaching. Actually, when I was the head, my teaching had reduced just a little bit because I was putting more time in the administrative responsibilities. But now I'm back to my regular teaching, my regular research, putting in more time there though.
And what's the future direction that you're envisioning now? So that was the last part of the first question.
The future direction for what? For myself?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a harder question because professors can make their life interesting by just being a professor. It's not an inertia situation. Actually, every day is very creative. Every day is very challenging. That said, I am thinking a little bit about maybe a year or 6 months stint outside academia just to get a sense of how the industry is responding to all the changes that are happening in the field of AI.
Wow.
So we'll see if that happens, but this I'm just saying, thinking aloud off the cuff, but no specific plans have been identified.
No, fantastic. In fact, my second question is very much related to a little thought that you mentioned here. For us from a distance, and I do not come from academia, but I have known your career. I have a couple of other people I know who are in academics. From a distance, academics is all about teaching, right? I mean, that's a stereotype that we have made. But I do know that, it's a good chunk of it could be teaching, good chunk of it could be original research. In fact, when I tell someone that almost like being a head of a new department would be almost like a very entrepreneurial position. It's like you're raising capital also for the funding of the department and things like that. So if you could just give some idea about how, if not a day, but at least a tenure of a year looks like for a professor like you. I mean, it would be very helpful for a good chunk of our audience who's probably thinking of becoming an academician.
Sure. A lot of my students ask me whether they should do a PhD and take the path of academia. And I tell them that, in our life, we are optimizing many objectives. How much time I have at my disposal, how's my health, how close friends I have, how good my family relationships are. But more often, from a professional side, we are optimizing money and fame.
And accomplishment?
Yes, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And I often tell people that if what you are singularly focused on is money, then you shouldn't be in academics.
Okay.
But if you are a bit more balanced with regards to how much money is worth to you and how much fame and all of that is worth to you, then academics is actually an ideal option. And I will explain how. Because often people interact with academia because they are students. And when they come into our class, they learn the subject from us and they think that this is a professor's job. They go and teach.
Right.
And yes, that's true. But if I start to tell you the kinds of things I do, or many professors do, you will be surprised. I often think of myself and all of us as one-person entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It's not like we have a huge team and we are building an empire. Some of us do though. But where are we engaged at? Of course, we are engaged in teaching. That's the reason why government has us. Right? And we are also engaged in research. You would be surprised to know that if I'm an excellent teacher, but I am a poor researcher, most likely I will not be promoted in IIT Delhi. So unless it is possible that I could be an excellent researcher, but an average teacher, then I will do really well in the system. So the system doesn't give us any positive reinforcement in terms of our career advancement for teaching.
Wow.
Our main criterion for moving forward in our career is research. What is the quality and quantity of original research that we have produced, and where are the places it has been published, how many people are following our work, how many people are inspired by our work. We have a standard metric called citations, so many other researchers will get inspired by us. But that's only another one side of us. So what are the other sides? And yes, you often think that it's administration, but no, there is much more that is going on. So companies contact us
Yes.
to engage with them either as a consultant or to do original research which is useful for that company. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? Because if you think about it, a professor is really a master of a small topic in the world, right?
Yep, yep.
Because it's a depth breadth trade off. Professors are really amazing at depth. They know something really deeply which nobody else knows, or very few people in the world know, right? So when a company or any other entity is stuck at that technical problem or at that place where a professor's depth can be of use, they will contact the professor. So I can't tell you the number of people who reach out to us saying that, AI is very important to us and we need your expertise in, helping us through the next steps or whatever it is. Okay. So that's a company. By the way, these companies can be at any level. So the IBM Research and Googles and Microsofts of the world interact with us. The mid-tier companies like TCS Research and Wipro interact with us. But startups like, Nodes and Graziti and many other young startups, they also interact with us.
Wow.
They need very different, we interact with them differently. Okay. Then the next thing that we do is that we advise governments on their strategies.
Okay.
In the case of AI, for example, AI, there is a national strategy on AI, right? AI is very important for our country and pretty much every country in the world in the current situation, right?
Right.
These are called frontier technologies. The government doesn't know what should the regulation be.
Yeah.
Who will give them advice? Professors are one of the people they trust for that kind of advice,
Right.
because they are government servants in some ways, right?
Absolutely.
So their advice is closest to the government's heart. Of course, they will also take advice from other entities, but we have a very strong role to play in the regulation. Then let's think about the research community. So the research community itself is comprises people who are researchers, students, academics, industry professionals everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Right. So they all come together and they think about the problems in the AI community themselves.
Right.
How should the AI community be structured? What should be the conference structure like? How should the papers be accepted, rejected? So we do a lot of reviewing. We read other people's papers and tell the conferences or the journals whether this paper is good, worthy of acceptance, worthy of an award and things like that. So we sit on all those kinds of committees.
Fantastic.
Right? Then we think about the AI as a field in the whole international ecosystem. So we are not limited to the national ecosystem. We are really broad in the international ecosystem. We have collaborators in various partner institutions.
Right.
I have a collaborator at AIMS. Now, AIMS doctors are amazing in and of themselves, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you do realize that today, medical science is getting really close to AI. In fact, every field is getting somewhat close to AI.
Absolutely.
And the doctors will know the medical issues.
Yeah.
They will not know the kind of AI that is needed to help them in dealing with problems, right? So they interact with us. We collaborate. So if you start to think about it, then we sit on boards of startups. We advise startups on how their thing should move forward. We sit on so many juries of all natures, be it award jury, be it this. So basically, long story short, and we do podcasts once in a while.
Yes, absolutely.
So the point is that, we are considered these people who are multifaceted. And over time, the number of external edges that we create creates our ecosystem, our entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Fantastic.
And teaching is one aspect of it, and research is another. But there is many other things going on.
So one, I am absolutely overwhelmed by just thinking, how do you manage everything like that? But a couple of questions that come directly to my mind. One is, you earlier said that the institution that you're a part of, for example, IIT Delhi, they mostly judge you, or the criteria of you doing good in your respective field is the number of papers that you write, right? Publish or perish.
Number
And
quality of papers. Say, I tell my students, it is not your job to write many papers. In fact, it is not what would I judge myself when I retire. It is, have I written one good paper?
One original research.
One research that changed something. And I'm still waiting to write that paper in my life.
Well, that is probably, that is something that is said that, my best has to come tomorrow. So I don't think,
Sure, but you can tell. Sometimes some work is at the right place, at the right time. It mobilizes, a lot of researchers, a new field gets created, everybody follows you, you become famous. this is sort of the dream of pretty much every researcher. So I wouldn't say that it's publish or perish. It's not number counting. It's not eye dotting. But yes, quantity is part of it. Quality is part of it. But if you have written one amazing paper, which a lot of people have, gotten inspired by, that is also sufficient. So, but good research is very important.
A couple of things that just branch out from the discussion is, one is, I feel then, in that scenario, shouldn't IIT Delhi or an institution of a similar repute be only focusing on researchers, almost like what CSIR I would imagine is doing, where people are just working on the research part? Why teaching at all then?
No, I mean, eventually, so think about it this way. If you want capacity in
Right.
any field,
Right,
we'll keep taking the example of AI because that is something I know the closest.
right.
Who will build capacity? People who understand the subject deeply.
Yeah.
Only they are able to impart this forward so that other people get inspired by and the ecosystem flourishes. I often tell this in many, many fora that if you want to energize the ecosystem, you have to energize the professors. If there are lots of amazing professors, they will train the next generation. Maybe even they will train the next teachers. They will train the next engineers. They will actually do the work, and so the whole ecosystem will thrive. If you take away this aspect, there are personal advantages to teaching. For example, I'll tell you my personal story. When I moved back to India in 2013, that was also the time when AI was going through its own transformation.
Right.
Deep learning and some of these very modern techniques, deep neural networks, etc., they were taking center stage. We were never trained in those areas.
Okay.
Because they were not very prominent in the 10 years before that or 15 years before that.
So then everyone in the world was at the same starting
Everyone in the world became at the same place. But because we are teaching, it gives us a reason to pick up new things. Because if we teach the old AI, our students will complain that you are teaching us the old things. Because we are forced to go stand in front of the class and teach something that we did not know earlier, we will work extremely hard to actually improve our knowledge. So let me give you an example. It's an old example. When I was a student preparing for IIT JEE, I used to go to one of the coaching centers, and they would give me a lot of knowledge in one class. What I will do is that I will go and teach my fellow students whatever I learned in the coaching class.
Wow.
These are my fellow students in school who did not get into the coaching.
Right.
Now, you may think that I am benefiting them.
No, but you are
But actually, I felt that I was benefiting myself. Because if I teach the same material twice to two different students, by the second time, I have understood it very, very deeply. In fact, what will happen is they will ask me questions and I will not be able to answer. That will create a start a churning process which will lead me to better clarity of these concepts. So, time and time again, I have felt that only when I teach, do I get the clarity of the topic, the clarity of thought and the topic that I want, where I can then further develop it and, extend it. This you can ask any professor and they will tell you that if they want to learn a new subject, they float a new course and teach it.
Fantastic.
So
this is like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, not a cheat sheet, but standing in front of the students and delivering a lecture on a new topic makes you learn much more than anything else that makes you learn that topic. At least that is what I have felt. So, long story short, I think we grow as researchers because we also teach. Just doing research is good, but working with students and giving them, teaching them new things makes us learn. They ask us hard questions, that makes us learn. We try to keep abreast of the changing times and we change our courses, that makes us learn. And then some of these students bring in novel ideas, and their novel ideas with our experience, it sometimes leads to very interesting research. So actually, I think students and this teaching process is central and one of the pillars of a strong research institution.
Do you think when they were starting the research institution, they would have thought or they would have been able to kind of envision that this is how it is going to pan out later? Like, research feeding into teaching and teaching feeding into research. I'm assuming some of the times when you're teaching a new course, there would be questions that would be posed out of absolute innocence or ignorance. And that would make you think. And that would probably provide a direction for a new research area to go forward.
Absolutely. I mean, students ask us questions we have never thought about. And because sometimes we think on the fly, sometimes we go back and think about it, but that's how we grow. And by the way, this is not new. I mean, this has been happening from 1600s or whatever. The institutions which do research have traditionally also been teaching institutions. And also you realize that whenever you look at a new faculty member candidate or a new researcher, you often ask who their advisor is. Who their advisor is. You look at their academic lineage, and that lineage tells you something about their way of thinking, because every lineage has a certain way of looking at the problem. And that subtlety we are able to recognize now when we have understood a certain amount of depth in the field. From the distance you may not feel that, but different professors have a different vantage point for looking at research, and that creates who they are.
Wow.
So it's a creative expression, research, but you don't realize it early on, because when you are studying, somebody gives you a question, you give an answer. There is only one correct answer, especially in maths and sciences. So that is not creative. But once you give them a question where there is no clear answer, then the same answer could go in many different directions.
Right.
And slowly you figure out that, oh, why am I going to that direction always? Because that's how I think. I'll give you a simple example. When I was a very young graduate student, I started working on a problem which my advisor gave me. The first time I came up with a solution, I went to the conference to talk about it.
Right.
Somebody in Australia had worked on the same problem.
Right.
And they had also got a paper in the same conference. So I went and looked at their solution. It was very different from my solution. So I got a little scared that they are also looking at the same problem. Maybe they will do good research ahead of me. But nothing. Next year, I did a follow-up of my work. They did a follow-up of their work. We were both solving the same next problem, but both our solutions were very different.
Wow.
So that is how I slowly learned that our solution is our creative expression in research. But you realize this only a few years into it. It's very hard to.
And is it something that comes naturally to you, or is it a part of lineage? How much of that would be a part of lineage? Is there a percentage we can assign, ratio, coefficient, or nothing like that?
It's very hard to say, because I think I was inspired by my advisor's vantage point. But of course, I had taken my courses. I had maybe some way of thinking which was natural to me. It is very hard to go back and pinpoint what was me in the early research that I did. Maybe I was being inspired by my advisor more than I was doing really original research. But today I have a vantage point and I understand it also.
Okay.
So, as an example. But it took me years to get there.
No, I have, there are a couple of, concluding points I wanted to say. Both, of all the things that you mentioned. One is, when they say original research, I have realized that there is nothing called, you could probably come up with some original research out of ignorance, but you have to spend a lot of time in a field to really come up with something original. Because, otherwise, how would you know what is original and what has been done in over a period of time? So original research or original thinking is something I believe is overrated.
I agree. In fact, changing topics, I don't know if you're following all the chat GPT and GPT-4 kinds of developments that have been happening. And you ask GPT-4 to write a movie script and it will give you really cool ideas for new movies, new stories, this, that. They will feel very creative. And then you ask yourself the question, well, it is trained on humanities data. How is it being that creative? And then you realize there is no such thing as really creative. We are always standing on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely.
In our research field, there were hundreds of people who came before me and are currently doing research also, who have come up with interesting next step ideas. And we are also pushing the boundaries. We are all taking whatever they have done as a given and maybe adding our delta, our masala, our variant to take it to the next step. Coming up, and very original could be, that it's very different from what many people are thinking about, but it will always be standing on the shoulders of giants.
What would have been the root node in that? Nature?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe whatever. I don't know. What is the root node of computer science? Would be mathematics. Root node of mathematics will go to philosophy. Root node of philosophy goes to Greece. It's you can't pinpoint where civilization started. Where it's all a continuum throughout the history of time.
Yeah, for the audience, I wanted to say we talked in a computer language, the root node. What it really means is, where did it all start?
Sure.
Yeah. And one, the other thing that when you mentioned that, you were talking about teaching and teaching as a way of learning and understanding, one statement and quotation that came to mind was, Einstein's, that if you cannot make a child understand a concept, then most likely you don't understand it yourself.
Yeah. it's very hard to dumb down the concept and take the intuition
Yeah.
and be able to express it out. If you are able to do that, you have understood the core of that concept.
And one last thing I wanted to, and tell me if you should go in that direction or not at all. I think in your introduction, you did not mention anything about music.
Yeah, I thought we were having a professional conversation, but sure. I mean,
No,
I
but
also have a.
the reason I'm going to mention music now is because when you mentioned the lineage part, that's the time, the thought that came to my mind was the gharanas of music. So in some
Yes.
sense, it is an analogy or a parallel.
Yes, absolutely. And the gharanas in music are somewhat more well defined, even though there is fluidity there. The gharanas in research are harder to delineate, but the intuitions are similar. Since you brought in music, I am a Hindustani classical music aficionado. I love the music of our past in India, and I am also an amateur harmonium player. I'll tell you a interesting thing. When I was young, I used to like music more than computer science.
I know, I remember
I
that.
used to love music much more deeply and intimately, and computer science was something I have to do because I'm good at it and I got a good rank and things like that. It took me a long time to balance it out.
Okay.
So now at this point in my life, I am happy to say that I do not love music more than AI. I love both these fields passionately.
Fantastic.
But it took me a long time to love AI passionately. So
Was it a part of training or it just happened?
I don't know. Maybe I was drawn to music much more naturally, and in research, it's a step by step process. And as it opened up, as I moved further, it opened up more and it opened up more. But it didn't naturally open up to me.
Okay.
Maybe it's everybody's experience. Maybe it's not. It is hard for me to say. But at the same time, since we are at the topic, I do feel I have a philosophy. I do feel that every creative person,
Right.
or every person who wishes to be creative, must pursue some creative form, some creative art or something. For example, I was a natural, I was doing computer science, but I think learning music and expressing my creativity through music honed my creative skills in general. And so when it was time for me that I understood the field of AI to some level of satisfaction, and then I started thinking deeper in there, I think I started becoming more creative based on the experience I had in music.
Yeah.
So I think doing this, maybe spending some time in doing logical activity like I do in computer science, and spending some time in doing some creative activity is great. In fact, if one should also put in some time doing physical activity. So if we can create a balance between, mind, body and brain, if I want to use those words, or another way of is physical activity, logical activity and aesthetic activity.
Yeah.
If we can create that balance,
Yeah.
then each thing will inform the other.
Absolutely.
Your body would be fit, your body would be thinking, you will be in the best of shape, and that would help in whatever work you are doing. Your creative skills will come in, and so whenever an opportunity arises, you will be able to use them to solve the problem better. So even the logical can be really inspired by the physical and the creative, and vice versa. So sometimes in music, I see that we call some musicians thinking musicians,
Right.
or even cricketers.
Yeah.
Some cricketers like Ravindran, Ashwin, Ravichandran Ashwin, Ashwin, not Ravindran. Ashwin is such a thinking cricketer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Everybody knows the last year's wide that he purposefully extracted from the bowler to win the seminal cricket match. That can only happen when you're a thinking cricketer.
Yeah.
So that can happen if you have a logical pursuit, but you are pursuing a physical sport. So if you are good at all three, then the ways in which these will all inform other and will make us a better person, there are just many more possibilities here.
Fantastic. Mausam, I'm coming to your home, and we're going to go for a run in Deer Park.
Yes.
Right? I'll at least
We
contribute
should.
to your,
We should.
the
We
physical
should.
pursuit.
Yes, we should.
So, you mentioned about, in fact, one of the things, we are short on time, but I still wanted to talk about, I think I've probably mentioned this to you. There was this book from Adam Grant called Originals. There he actually has done an empirical study where he has talked about, looked at the history of Nobel laureates. And he has looked at, what were the chances of people, what are the backgrounds of people who have won Nobel Prize over a period of time in some chosen field of science. One of the learnings he has come up with is people who, or rather, one of the conclusions is people who are only pursuing academics or they are chosen science. Their chances of getting a Nobel, a Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize is probably in one or two digits, right? Or one digit, so 2% to 5%. But the moment if someone has also pursued some sort of creative expression or creative art,
Yeah.
the chances increase.
Very nice.
Chances increase further if somebody has actually, so if it's simple art, they have gone and they have done some sculpting.
I see.
The chances increase further, and the chances are maximum if somebody who is also a scientist in the front but in the back is a performing artist.
Interesting.
So the chances of an individual to do well, if they are pursuing a science as a main subject, but equally opposite or tangentially opposite, some sort of a performing art, their chances are highest.
Interesting. I didn't know this. This is very interesting, and I would love to think more as to why performing art would do better than art. But I have.
So of all the
I don't
scales
have
of
theory.
art,
Yeah.
performing art was the lead indicator that you would actually get a Nobel Prize.
Wow.
Mausam, you talked about the idea of lineage or schools of thought. You are a mentor to a lot of PhD students at IIT. You are going to influence some schools of thoughts, and some of the children you would have, some of the kids who have come through have now become full-fledged PhDs and maybe professors as well, if I may say so. Have you, when you are looking at these all bunch of students over a period of years, have you seen? Can you assign or pinpoint a finger at saying that okay, these are the characteristics of someone who's going to become a very good researcher? Can you see the pattern clearly, or it's all over the place?
No, I don't actually see any pattern because first of all, research is very highly multifaceted. If you are a very theoretical person who loves numbers or who loves to do algebra, there is a place for you in research. And if you're a very applied person who wants to build something and really benefit humanity, there is a place for you there, and everything in the middle. So research is for everyone.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to have this mindset that I am willing to push some agenda for a long time with limited success and possibly very limited support. This is very important. Why?
Okay.
Because research is a very solo activity.
Right.
When you are doing your thesis, who cares for your thesis?
Probably nobody.
Nobody but you.
Yeah, and maybe your advisor.
But your advisor cares only to the extent that you care. If you are not putting in the effort, the advisor's motivation will go down. So PhD is a long haul. PhD is a long haul with a lot of isolation.
Right.
So if that environment is not conducive for you, then it's very hard to be a successful researcher, at least learn how to do research. Because, to learn anything new, you have to go through difficult times. Only then when you come out, you have become a stronger person. We often say this, right? That somebody who has gone through very tough times, if they have come out, then they are now a much stronger person.
Right.
And this also happens in research because you are learning to be a new researcher when you had very limited exposure initially, because we don't teach people to be researchers. So then you work on a problem, you bang your head against it, you're not able to solve it, you try this, you try that, you are trying many ideas, you are trying to talk to people, but only you care for it, so nobody's thinking very deeply with you, and then suddenly something emerges.
Right.
And so if you're willing to go through this process of roller coaster, you think that something is coming up, you think that my idea is going to work, and you try it on one domain, it works, and the second domain it fails, and the third domain it fails, and you are back to the drawing board, you are scratching your head. All our researches, almost all, there is no research which goes from the idea to a successful research paper like this. Every time we have an idea, we try to find it, we start with a lot of bang, and then things are not working, and then we are lost, and it goes through a roller coaster. It's almost like a startup. A startup also goes through a roller coaster. In fact, in startups, you often start with an idea and you end up with something completely different, right? This happens in research all the time because we are finding the unknown.
Yeah.
So we think this is what we should get to know at the end of our journey, but we will probably get to know something very different which we didn't anticipate in the first case. So I think the ability to go through that kind of a process is very important for a researcher.
So if I may, you are saying a couple of things. One is somebody who is a thinker, who's continuously analyzing, and somebody who's also at the same time has the courage and the patience to go for the long haul. Those two are possibly some, some possible symbols of success, or in this chosen field.
And I will add somebody who is not just a thinker but also a doer.
Okay.
This is very important.
Very
so if
interesting.
somebody is thinking for you and you are only doing the doing, then there is no way you will be able to be an independent researcher. But if you are only doing the thinking and not doing the doing, then you will never be able to show to the world of that your thoughts are meaningful. So we often say that maybe to be a good researcher, you have to be sharp, and you also have to be really, you have to have that ethic, the work ethic that is needed for the long haul, right? So that discipline and hard work, it's incredibly important. In fact, once in a while, your advisor can think for you, but the advisor will not do for you. So if I have to make a call, I would prefer a person who is a better doer than a person who is a better thinker. But a good researcher requires both.
I mean, the only example I can think about is, back in the movie Oppenheimer, there were two guys. Oppie was essentially the thinker, and there was another guy who was actually trying out things in his lab next to his. So, yeah, interesting to hear. Mausam, you spent time as a professor both in India and in US. Are there any comparisons? I know there are many, but okay, so let's pick one dimension: quality of students.
Quality of students for undergraduates, we are spoiled. IIT Delhi gets the best undergraduates, almost the best undergraduates anywhere in the world.
Wow.
All IITs get that, right? I was at University of Washington. University of Washington is one of the top schools in computer science.
Yes.
Our undergraduates were great, but they were still, our IIT Delhi undergraduates, or maybe IIT Bombay or equivalent, they will be maybe even much stronger than the undergrads of University of Washington, for example. At the same time, when it comes to PhD students, somehow we are in this country, we have this mindset that if we want to do higher studies, we have to go abroad. Now, it's okay if you are getting to go to Stanfords and University of Washingtons of the world.
Right.
But often I have seen that our students will go to the US or UK just because they want to be there, even in a much lower ranked university. And that, of course, pains me to no end. But eventually what ends up happening is that the students that we get are very few.
Right.
Because we don't compromise on quality, and we don't get the numbers, right? Either we compromise on quality and get higher number of students, but then it will be very hard to get them to finish a PhD, right? Yeah. So we have fewer of them. Who are the people who we get? These are people who are really good, but they have a second reason to be in India.
Okay.
Sometimes they are nationalists. They have this identity that I want to really contribute to the country. Sometimes these are people who have a mother at home and they have to take care of the mother, and they don't want to go they don't want to be a 24-hour flight away and things like that. So therefore, we have not yet been able to create structures where a lot of people end up doing PhD in our own country, right? So that is the first thing. So now when we compare the PhD students that we have, because of that, what ends up happening is that the top cream students you will find much more in the top ranked institutions in the US or other countries, right? So Chinese students, this is not true. A lot of amazing Chinese students stay in China.
Right.
But this is somehow true in India because we are great English speakers or whatever it is. So the other thing I have felt is that some of the older students, like people who were in industry for a long time, and then they said, oh, I really want to develop this specific field because this is a problem I saw in my company, and this is a problem that will really benefit humanity. That kind of older PhD students we rarely find in India.
Right, but they are there in US.
Again, not in large numbers, but they are there in the US. You will find a lot of PhD students who have a spouse and they have children and they are actually doing PhD.
Right.
The point is that PhD is never something that is always done right after your undergrad. Sometimes you just work in the field, you understand the field, you get that depth, and then you go and do a PhD, right? But that mindset we don't have in our country, unfortunately.
I'm imagining those PhD students would be both an extreme pleasure to have in a class and a pain in every part of your body.
No, I wouldn't say they are pain. In fact, they often know what they want. So your job as an advisor in that case
becomes
facilitating them to achieve what they want.
You don't need to sort out their
You don't
directional
need to,
issues.
you don't need to. There are not that many rough edges that you need to
Yeah.
work on.
Mosam, it's no big secret that back in the day you cracked the IIT entrance exam. What rank was it? I believe, if I could remember, was it 7?
No,
What was it?
I won't tell.
Something in 1 or 2 digits only.
Something in two digits, sure.
Okay, yeah, something in digits, right? So you slogged it. I'm sure you worked very hard towards it. Um, Now a lot of water has crossed the bridge. It's been almost 20 years, 25 years now that we all went through that part of our lives. Do you think it was worth it?
Well, for me, it was worth it. I can't say for others, but um, I think that you don't need to be at a top institution to be successful. Um, for example, one of the famous CEOs, Satya Nadella, is from
Hyderabad, Manipal,
Manipal.
Institute, yeah.
Manipal, and in our days, Manipal was not the top institution.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah.
good as an institution. At the same time, the education, at least in our country, the education in top institutions
Right.
is just much stronger
Hmm.
than the tier 2 institutions.
Absolutely.
So it gives you better grounding, better starting point, better first job.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, just think of it as everybody is trying to climb the same mountain,
Yeah.
and everybody has a speed,
Yeah.
and everybody is starting from a slightly different point.
Yeah.
You may think of, there's a beautiful video on privilege.
Hmm.
You must have seen that, where they put everybody in the same line and says, if your parents, if you had to work for your education, take 2 steps back,
Yeah,
and this,
yeah,
that, and
yeah.
you find that not everybody is starting from the same point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, even just in our upbringing, we are starting from very different points. That is true for our society also. But similarly, if you start from a top institution, then you get much better education, you get a much better job, you get much better grounding in your subject. You can take 5 steps forward
Right.
in that race.
Right.
So it's just that. After that, it's what you do with it. So some other student who may not have had great education can maybe go to a weaker MS place, bring themselves up, then get a good job, then get better, and then get better. And if they're running faster than you, then they will get ahead of you. I mean, and again, I am not saying that your metric of being at the top
so
is how much money you have made or anything like that. But a sense of accomplishment or whatever you have done with your life.
No, so when we are comparing, I'm asking specifically for the society's well-defined norms of success. So there I should clarify that I was asking for those, so whether it's a professional accomplishment or the number of, the amount of money that you earn.
Yes.
Um,
So even for all of those, right?
Yeah.
You will find that if you get a better starting point, a better platform to launch yourself, that will definitely be helpful.
I distinctly remember, maybe it's many years back when we had this discussion, and you did mention the fact that you do run a risk of burnout.
Okay.
When you are, I'm also talking, keeping in mind that there is a battery of people who are living in dingy apartments in Kota.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect as well. So from that aspect, maybe in the times when we were growing up, probably the situation was not that extreme.
Yeah.
And it has become extreme. So, while I do understand the inequity between a tier 2 institution or a tier 3 institution and an IIT Delhi or a DC for that matter, the distinction is quite a bit, right? So basically the difference is quite a bit. So if the matter, so I do understand that there is nothing in between. If there were more institutions in between, then of course things would have become a little more easier.
So I started out by saying that it definitely helped me.
Yeah.
So first of all, that answer is very specific to you, what my experience has been, right? But let's contextualize it back in today's society, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely don't support this whole quota factory model. There is just no question about it. I also want to say that...
And this is one of the toppers of IIT speaking.
Yes.
I would like to emphasize.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, this is what I think. There is no way that you take yourself through that kind of torture. I mean, the kind of mental health issues that are coming up, these are young kids.
Yeah.
They are leaving their homes and, going in this kind of an environment where there is just cutthroat competition.
Absolutely.
That is very hard for most people to deal with. At the same time, the other thing to recognize is that we now have 20 something IITs.
Yeah.
So not every IIT is equal in their education
Right.
quality, but many of them are trying to become very good. There are a lot of amazing NITs
Yeah.
which produce fantastic people. NIT Warangal, NIT Trichy. I'm only aware of
Yeah.
computer science. Jadavpur University does an amazing job of producing computer scientists in Bengal.
This is Kolkata, right?
Bengal. Bengal,
Yeah.
Jadavpur. There are many, many such really amazing centers which will give you a decent launching point, right? Also, of course, many of the private institutions
Yeah.
are not bad. Manipal is very good, but of course, there is BITS and there are many other very interesting universities, these liberal arts colleges that have come up,
Absolutely.
the
The whole
Ashoka University,
Ashoka,
Shiv Nadar, Bennett, and so on and so forth. And I hope that similar things are happening in other parts of the world, I mean, in the country also. I only know about Delhi region. So basically, now the education industry, the field itself, is through a process of metamorphosis.
Right.
And it will allow better opportunities for a lot of people. Not everybody's path has to be linear
Yes.
in that one direction, that everybody has to go through the IIT thing. Also, I would say that, at least in the urban centers, a lot of parents are reasonably well to do.
Yeah.
So many of them are able to send their kids to decent undergraduate institutions anywhere in the world.
Yes.
And that is also, and if you can afford it, that definitely makes your life a little bit easier, because then you don't have to go through the cutthroat IIT competition, and you can go to University of Minnesota or whatever equivalents, good places, right? But so long story short, I think there are many opportunities.
Right.
There's one more thing I want to say, and that's very important. The number of students in my time
Yeah.
who said that we are doing IIT because we got a rank, we hate engineering, was very high then, and I think it is very high even now.
Okay.
I want to emphasize this again and again to everybody that look, we are now living in a society where every field or many fields are now respected to a level that you can have a financially happy career.
Yes.
You can make your career being a artist now. You can make a career being a psychologist now. You can make your career being a designer, or a management consultant, or they're just creative job profiles that I may not know all of them. But not everybody's life has to be engineer or doctor, which is how life used to be nowadays.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to be thoughtful in making those choices for our children and for ourselves if we are young, that we don't have to follow the bandwagon. And even if engineering is our thing, we don't have to really stress ourselves so much that we are not able to achieve our potential. Right? And we burn out before we reach that point, right? So not everybody has to go through IIT, but at the same time, I still want to say that if you get to IIT, it will give you a strong launching pad, and there is no question about it.
And then the whole community, the
there.
branding of IIT across the world.
That's right.
Everyone knows it, right?
That's right.
But good to hear that it's not the end of world. It is basically you have many more opportunities now.
Yes.
It's where you're starting from, so that's great to hear. Mausam, now we are entering to the second part of the podcast, which is actually the most important one, which is essentially future of education.
Yeah.
You are spearheading a research in an absolutely unknown territory, that is AI. The whole world has taken note of AI. So I'm assuming you have a fantastic vantage point to tell what to you will be the future of education.
I don't think education is any different from any other field.
Okay.
And every field is changing.
Yeah.
Right? Medicine is changing.
Yeah.
How companies are run is changing.
Right.
And so is education. Right? So how is education going to change? I think more and more technology is going to show.
Yeah.
And more and more, at least thankfully, more and more awareness of mental health is going to show up. And both of those are fantastic developments as far as I'm concerned, right? So how would technology change education? Well, of course, I think a teacher in our days used to deal with 50, 60 students.
Absolutely.
They never knew what was happening in every student's life. Now we can imagine hybrid models where some, education support systems are part of the curriculum. They can practice on an online platform or on a school-oriented platform. The software knows what they are good at, what they are not good at, how regularly are they practicing, not practicing. That will give information to the teacher. The teacher can then figure out when to give what kind of an intervention. I anticipate that this interplay between teacher and technology is going to become center stage for the education a few years down the line.
So technology is going to be an assistant to a teacher to better assess in academic sense, I actually have a solution. I was talking to someone where they could possibly use AI to understand the gestures of the as a child walks
Yes.
in,
Yeah.
and if the child is probably unhappy, or the sad face or the sad grimace is there for 5 continuous days, then a message actually goes to the class teacher that something is wrong with this particular child. I find it invasive, a little draconian, or little more, what do you say, intrusive. But I do feel that there is, if you can help someone with that, what's wrong?
Yes, and there will be a lot of value, and then of course there is value alignment from the aspect of the teacher. When should you intervene and when should you not intervene? Right?
Yeah.
Too much, it will become intrusive.
Yeah.
But letting the child be and not caring for them is probably also worse, maybe much worse, right? Than maybe saying two things too many times, right? So similarly for the other developments that are happening, which is in the language model world, about all the chat GPT and GPT-4, and often you realize that since these things exist, it is likely that our future employees or even present employees will be using these as tools to increase their productivity.
Right.
And so I think some of the education curriculum needs to evolve to make technology center stage, or at least an important element in what we teach them. So we have to now make our children ready for the next, for the future. They need to be aware of, they need to be conversant with robotics. They need to be conversant with, tools like language models. They need to learn how to work with these tools to get what they want with higher productivity. Those are kinds of things that we will have to teach them. In fact, you'll be surprised. I'm scared to say, but that maybe tomorrow we may not need to learn coding to the level of depth that you and I studied when we studied computer science, because these language models are so good at coding. But you should know what to tell them, how the code should be structured, what is good code, what is not good code. So you need to have all those values, but you may not need to do too much software coding yourself. So I think the future is going to look like for many jobs.
In fact, I'll stop you there.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing you mentioned, and the thought that came to my mind was, you were saying that you have to, as somebody who's actually a prompt engineer, I think that's what they call it, right? Who's giving prompts to the chat GPT or language learning model and things. So I think of, when you're trying to create something, I think of you as a composer. So composer, or somebody who's actually, manning the orchestra. So the composer is the one who, one can probably argue that they should have played each of the instruments well, or they should have had the understanding of all the instruments. Only then they can become a fantastic composer.
Yeah.
So while you say that you may not need to have in-depth knowledge of computer science or coding, but I find that as contradictory.
So I didn't say you may not need to do that much kind of in-depth coding yourself.
But you should have understood
You have to have the knowledge.
Yeah.
You cannot interact with somebody if you don't understand their language.
Yeah.
And coding is the language.
Yeah.
So you have to understand the language. You need to learn all the programming practices. You need to have a sense of, you need to have the value system to say this is good code and this is not good code.
So in some sense, are you saying that in the world of tomorrow, when prompt engineering or chat GPT is all, or some format of that is all pervasive in all our lives, there is just no way for you not to have an analytical background? You have to have analytical background. So I'm not going to the extent of saying that you have to be a coder, but at least for you to place your position or questions correctly, you should be, I'm assuming, if I go back to my discrete mathematics days, you have to think like that.
So is this a question for the engineering fields, or is this a question for general fields? So because I don't think that an artist needs to have very strong maths necessarily to be a good artist. So that's not what I am saying. So if you're an engineer, you better have a strong analytical background. If you're a doctor, you better have a strong, analytical bagnround from the biology side, of course, right? So you obviously have to have a strong analytical background to your field. That is not what I'm saying that, that you anyway need.
But the part that you have to have if an ability to analyze any situation is a transferable skill, then, I'm talking about that rock bottom, the root node there. Your ability to analyze any patterns, any situation, any code, any math.
Yeah, so I go back to what I said earlier, right? You have to have analytical, aesthetic, and physical exercise skills. I mean, you need to have that balance. And if you don't have analysis skills, there will be places you will be found short-handed. And if you are specifically, if you are working in an engineering-oriented field or a sciences career, then it's a given that you have to have a strong analytical skill. But let's say we take an example of an artist.
Yeah.
Does an artist on a regular basis need to have a very strong analytical skills to be successful in art? I'm not saying that. I am saying that you need to have the ability to work with machine to create good art.
Yeah.
You need to have a sense of, okay, if machine created some art, you need to have the value system and alignment to say that, okay, machine, this is not the art I was looking for because of these reasons. Now, you can call it analytical skills or not, but you need to be able to communicate with the machine and you need to be able to tweak it and have that value system so that you can produce good art. You need to know good from bad. You need to know right from wrong. All of those skills are going to be essential. But I am not saying that everybody in the world has to be an engineer or has to have the analysis skills of an IIT student or something like that.
So, I did interrupt you in between. I think one of the things you mentioned when you were talking about what the future of education is going to be like, you said that there's going to be strong intervention of technology, and technology will be something which will be an assistant to teachers. Was there anything else you wanted to say there?
I also feel that there is an opportunity to really contribute to education in villages and tier 4, tier 3 towns, because these are the towns where the human teachers, they are not that strong. We have learned horror stories after horror stories of children, no teacher, or really terrible teacher, poor teacher. So I think these are the places where I really hope somebody brings in more and more technology, possibly even having technology take the main role of education. I mean, of course, I'm thinking a little bit farther in the future, but I really hope that places which don't get that kind of accessible, high quality education, the technology plays a meaningful role. By the way, technology is already playing some role. So, I teach this NPTEL course on artificial intelligence, which is run every year. And every year, 40,000 students from our country take that course.
Oh, fantastic.
So, this is not just me, of course.
It's everyone else.
There are a lot of MOOCs, there are a lot of this course material available online at our disposal. So, I think there is already technology playing some role, and I think it can become even better in understanding how the student is doing.
Fantastic. So, Mausam, again, coming back to your vantage point as an explorer in this domain, which is absolutely new. If there is one thing that the schools can change and have to change, just one thing, one subject, one book, whatever that one thing is, putting you on a spot, I know.
No, I don't think about K through 12 education very much. So it's a little bit hard for me to answer. But I think if I go back to my schooling and think about what is one thing I would hope gets changed, it would be that the students should be encouraged to be more creative in the fields that they are studying. Now, I know it's very hard because there was always one right answer and the answer was at the back. If we had to write an essay, it had to have this structure and you had to follow that structure. There was very limited scope of creativity, and I think it's hard. But to the extent that we can inculcate that or try to inculcate that, that would be valuable. I remember that there would be teachers who would sort of, if we ask a difficult question, they would shut us up. I think that's not fair. We should encourage the children to ask questions. We should be willing to say, look, this is a hard question. We'll find the answer together. But shutting down their curiosity, shutting down their creativity helps nobody in the long run. But it's a hard thing to change. So I understand that it's not an easy thing that I'm saying.
Two things. One is, I am not going to name the teacher. We probably would have studied from the same teacher. One science exhibition, I had said that I'm going to make robots. And she made me start in front of everyone and say, Dekho, bachcho, tali bajao, bhalla robot banayega. So, I run a company which basically makes maximum number of robotic kits out of India. The second thing was, I was not expecting, it's interesting to hear that you are coming and talking about creativity and inculcating creativity. I was expecting that, you would have probably said they should be introduced to some analytical subjects, some data science, some AI. So it's interesting.
In our country, the quality of average math is very high.
Oh, wow.
Already compared to many other cultures. Now, I'm not saying that we are stronger than Chinese. Maybe China is even harder math. But I think the general analytical skills that we force our students through
Right.
is already very high. And CBSE has already introduced AI at class 9.
Yes, they have.
And I often question
We have created
whether
courses around that.
whether poor ninth grade kids, whether they are ready to understand any AI in any depth. Because to understand some AI, real actual technical
Yeah.
side, you have to have done some calculus. After that, you can start to
Yeah.
get into some. After that, you learn some computer science. Then you get into at least basics
But
of
the
AI.
good part is,
So they
yeah.
understand. They explain the ethics. They explain the big picture.
Yeah.
So that's okay. I mean, I am not against that. But the point is that I don't think that we need
No,
to
that's not
force
really
people
AI,
to
by
more
the way.
analytical skills.
Yeah, that's not real AI, by the way.
Yeah.
It's more, ethics part, and also whatever coding part is happening is more application of AI.
Yeah.
So, thank you. I
But
think-
exposure is good.
Yeah.
Giving exposure to all these things is great. There is no
Fantastic.
question about
Right.
that.
So one thing that you talked about to conclude is, provide them more creative experiences and asking them to think more laterally, right? We move on to the next part of the podcast, and in your scenario, I'm gonna keep it like, as you said, rapid fire questions. There is one answer, and you have to pick one.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've seen Wall-E.
No.
Wall-E is a movie where there's this robot who's left on Earth because everyone else has moved to a different planet.
Okay.
And when Wall-E gets to the other planet, Wall-E sees that all the human beings have been so much cuddled and cushioned by technology that they are literally nothing but pieces of battery. They are actually in this world where everything is being happening for them. Machines are, like prompt engineering, or this is just the start.
Sure.
The next step could be so many other things. So that world, or a world where there is no technology, completely devoid of technology, pick one.
I don't think the first world is going to happen.
Okay. No, so pick one. Pick one. There's no, it depends, and there is no, caveat.
If you give me the option of having a set of people which are completely dumb and technology is doing everything for them versus a set of people who are, who have no technology but who are doing things by themselves, I would pick the second, because the second people will get to the technology which we have today in the long run.
Fantastic. With a professor, that's impossible. You can't put them in boxes. They have to break the boxes, or maybe create some lineages or
I
linkages.
picked one, so I was in your box.
Next questions. Humans will become irrelevant because of AI, or AI is that a possible outcome, or AI is just like another new chapter in technological advancement? There are some really, really smart people who have actually questioned the advent of AI. Elon Musk being one of them, where he's portraying AI as this evil force. So is AI just another another invention of a wheel, another invention of a supercar or a new engine, or is it something more fundamentally different?
Elon Musk loves to badmouth AI while he's using a lot of it, and almost all his work is based on AI, because Tesla has to do self-driving.
Yeah.
Self-driving is based on, so it's a real contradiction, right? So please don't get me started on Elon Musk. Nevertheless, I think it's a disruption bigger than just another engine. But I do not anticipate AI taking over. Okay, I think humans have incredible creativity, incredible capabilities, and once technology becomes good, we work with it, add our things to it, and really take the whole mankind forward. So I'm very positive.
So you're saying it's more of the same that is going to happen, but a far deeper technological disruption.
I wouldn't say more of the same, but I don't have a dystopian outlook.
Okay, fantastic.
It's more than more of the same, for sure.
Yeah, it's always the grays, right? Analog answers. Okay, last question in the same vein. Should there be a robot tax or no? I guess do you understand the concept of robot tax?
No.
So basically, Bill Gates came up with this idea
Okay.
that companies which are going to manufacture robots, because robots are going to be mechanical beings, they are going to displace a lot of human beings out of jobs. So now, how do we take care of these human beings who have been displaced? Either the ones who were currently working, or the ones who were supposed to join. So any company which actually manufactures robots, they should be given, they should be taxed higher than any other company making any other sort of widgets.
Is car a robot? Is machinery a robot? is any manufacturing process, are they robots? I bet they're all robots.
Yeah.
They have all in the past displaced people. We used to have Tonga riders. We used to have rickshaw drivers. They have all been displaced by cars and taxis. If we don't need an additional tax on automotive industry, we don't need a tax on robots. I do believe that people will get displaced. I do believe that some rehabilitation has to happen. I do believe that we need to ensure that everybody has at least a minimum quality of life that is, that comes with being a human. So that is very important. I am not sure if robot tax is the answer for that.
Okay, fantastic. Awesome. It was a privilege to have you on this podcast. There's just one last surprise that I'm going to throw at you.
Okay.
If you feel, usually I've tried to cover a lot of aspects. I've known you personally. I've known senior professional achievements as well. I've tried to cover a lot of aspects, given, my knowledge of you. But if there was anything that there was any question that I forgot to ask, so, pose a question to yourself, which you feel, it should have been asked in this podcast.
Okay. There's a thought that I want to bring up.
Yeah.
So, whether there is a question for it or not, we can frame a question. But I want to say that we often say, follow your heart.
Yeah.
When we were kids, we did not have the luxury of following our heart.
Yeah.
When because we had to go through this, doctor and engineer life and so on and so forth. I think our kids are much more aware. At least they have more opportunities, at least in the urban centers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's happening in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. Maybe they are still they are still stuck there. I hope that will change. But I also felt when I interacted with different children, different students, different people, that some of us know what we want, what our heart says.
Yeah.
And many of us have no clue what our heart says.
Yeah.
I think we need to collectively think about those kids who don't know.
Okay.
Follow your passion. The natural response is, I don't know what my passion is. And it was not AI for me, as I told you earlier. It was music.
Yeah.
And it evolved.
Yeah.
So how do we make sense of all this complication, right? Because, we now have the ability to follow our heart, but we have no clue where do we go? What is the thing that we need to follow? And so it's a hard decision problem, but we really need to think about what to do with these children. We need to give them opportunities to explore themselves.
Yeah.
We need to encourage them to slowly get better at it. At the same time, we don't have to just keep randomizing them by giving them more and more opportunity without really having them build any depth. So at some point, we need to switch towards saying, okay, you have really gotten your opportunities. What do you like a little bit more than the other? What can you see yourself doing at least for the next 40 years of your life? Right. What do you hate the least?
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have a passion today. Maybe once you start working on it, in the long run, you will develop a passion like I did in the case of AI. So I think we are not doing enough for these children, and we should. Okay. We should think about them, and we should create mechanisms collectively for them to be successful. I think if we can find really amazing things for them to do, and if they find their passion, collectively we will move forward much better.
Mausam, it's always an honor and a privilege to hear to you. The only problem is whenever I talk to you, I have a sleepless nights because you have sown those seeds which are difficult for me to decipher immediately. So I have to keep my brain working overnight. So fantastic. Thank you very much for coming and doing this podcast for us. And we will continue on our respective journeys of exploration.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Yeah.